Welcome everybody again to another episode of the IdeaXme show that profiles the humans behind the really big ideas that are shaping our world, inspiring the future and future creators and all those that like really great stories. I'm Ira Pastor, your life sciences ambassador along for the journey. So today we are going to be heading back towards the theme of the human microbiome, which, as we've discussed before, represents this estimated 100 trillion or so aggregate of microbiota, bacteria, fungi, protists, viruses, and so forth that reside either on, within, or symbiotically as part of the human body, and ultimately can have dramatic effects on human health, wellness, and longevity. We are extremely honored today to be joined by none other than Naveen Jain, well-known philanthropist, technology pioneer, entrepreneur, ultimately driven to solve many grand challenges through innovation. He is the well-known founder of several very successful companies, including Moon Express, Bluedot, TalentWise, Intelius, InfoSpace, and Viome, which we're going to be talking a lot about on this show, which is focused on disrupting healthcare with the goal of ultimately making illness elective by identifying various microbial biomarkers that can be predictive of disease, and ultimately how we adjust the microbial imbalances for personalized nutrition. Ultimately, as he says, making illness a matter of choice, not a matter of bad luck, and ultimately using foods as our medicines. Mr. Jain is also the director of the board at Singularity University, where he's focused on educating and inspiring leaders to address humanity's grand challenges through innovation. He is the director of the board of the X Prize Foundation, where he's focused on various incentive prizes to find solutions to different challenges. Recently launched the $1 Million Women's Safety X Prize to empower various women around the world. He has been awarded numerous honors for his entrepreneurial success, too many to list here, but some such as the Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award, the Albert Einstein Technology Medal, Ellis Island Medal of Honor, Most Creative Person by the Fast Company organization. In addition to Viome, on the life sciences technology front, Sir Jain is in the process of setting up different prize challenges to develop a digital doctor, AI expert systems to improve access to primary care physicians. He's exploring ways to develop neurometric systems to create better learners and develop neuroscience-based video games that are effective to teach students skills like math, science, and history. And he's a very strong believer that we should be doing a lot more on the synthetic biology front, creating biofactories to help reduce food shortages, using microbes to clean up water, harness energy from the ocean. A lot of exciting things here. Naveen Jain, thank you for taking the time out of your so busy schedule to come on the show today and talk with us.
First of all, Ira, it's an honor and an absolute pleasure. I mean, I think the bio makes me look like as if I am actually really doing things that are going to someday solve the humanity's grand challenges. But point is, you have to have a clear vision of what you want the world to be. You cannot accept the world as is. You have to believe that you can create a better world. And at least if you can imagine a better world, you're one step closer to creating it than anyone else.
I completely agree with you on that. Typically, we start off by giving our guests the floor for a little while just to talk about themselves. Obviously, there's not a lot of people in an innovation sphere around this world that don't know your name, but if you could, for some of the other folks that watch this show, if you could take a little time, what I'll call sort of the pre-Viome era, if you could go into, where you grew up, how you got interested in engineering, and a little bit of your path through sort of the tech world, that would be a great place to sort of lay the ground for what we're going to get into.
Well, first of all, I hate talking about myself. So I'm going to try to see as little as I can about myself. And really, I want to focus on the things that I have learned in life and how we can apply those lessons to the life. So someone who is listening to it can go out and do something that could fundamentally change the trajectory of how humanity is going to live. Obviously, I grew up in a very, very humble background, came from India. We didn't have food to eat. We didn't have a place to stay. Came to the United States with $5. 35 years ago, or maybe 37 years ago, but who's counting now? But long time ago. And, God has been just extremely kind to us. I mean, I think that he has placed so much trust in with his kindness to us. I look at life today and saying, what can I do to pay back to the society that has given me so much, that actually willingly embraced me in this country, gave me the opportunity to succeed in this life, and really given me everything that I could have possibly ever dreamed about. So I spend most of my days just thinking about what are the things that I could dedicate 10 years, 20 years of my life that, if successful, can improve the lives of billions of people. And to me, what really I find most fascinating is that a lot of the people, tend to focus on the things that are really expert at, the people who are really good at something. And what I found is that once you become expert in any field, you become more or less, in my humble opinion, useless in that field. And what I mean by that is you become more like an incrementalist. You can do something 10% better or 15% better than anyone else if you are expert in the field. But you can never make it 10 times or 100 times better when you're an expert. Because to do that, you have to really challenge the foundation of everything that experts have taken it for granted. And that can only come when you're actually bringing the expertise from a completely different industry and looking at this world and saying, why would you even go here? Why would you even do this way, right? And you challenge the foundation, and suddenly you go out and make something that is 10x or 100x better. And to me, that has been my journey. I have started 7 companies, and no 2 companies have ever been in the same industry, because I really felt that is really how you change the way people live their lives. Like, going to, I have, when I started my first computer company, I have never, ever seen a computer in my life. I have no degree in computer science. I've never seen a computer in my life. And I know going to the moon, I am not a rocket scientist, but to me, the rocket science is all about the mindset. The minute you start to believe something is not possible, it becomes impossible only for you and no one else, right? So to me, imagination is what the only limit we have to what we can achieve is our imagination. I still remember vividly my mom. She loved me. She would always say, son, you're so smart. You can do anything you want. And then she would go very proudly, sky is the limit, right? And you know what? Very interesting thing is, she did not realize the sky doesn't exist. The sky is nothing but a figment of our imagination. Because when you go from here to the moon, you don't say, hey, mom, I just passed the sky, right? There is no sky. So my point is, how many of these skies that we create in our way, that means we somehow create these artificial boundaries, the artificial walls, and we call them sky and say, that is the limit to what I can achieve. And to me, those are nothing but our imaginary hurdles, because once you cross them, then people say, what was that hurdle for? And that happens time and time again. You remember when people were on horses and they thought, oh my God, if these things become automated like car and they go 30 or 40 or 50 miles an hour, the human body is going to explode. There's no way the human body can take that much of a speed, right? And the same thing that happened when Roger Bannister actually, when he crossed the 4 miles a minute barrier, the people thought 4 minute a mile barrier. No one ever thought that was possible. And the minute Roger did that, 13 other people did that the year after. So it wasn't something that he created a new innovation or new technology. He simply showed that humans can do that. And that to me is the key of achieving great success, is for someone to show you it is possible, for you to believe it is possible. So someone doesn't even have to show it to you. You have to start believing it is possible. And that's how you achieve the great things in life.
You mentioned a lot about your many sort of entrepreneurial journeys. None was ever within the same industry. You've had success in search engines and data mining and moonshots, various types. But one thing that while we do see it sometimes, we don't always see a lot of the successful Silicon Valley folks like yourself. I know you're in Seattle now, but the West Coast tech folks get into biotech. And biotech, people argue one way or another. It's a very different realm because of FDA and all the other hurdles that, and go into a whole discussion about biotech. What made you interested after having success in all these other areas, interested in biotechnology and of all things. We'll get into Viome a little bit, but why biotech for you all of a sudden?
Well, first of all, this is the first time in the human history where we actually are able to fundamentally rethink, reimagine the biotech. So biotech has always been about trial and error. Now, now we finally actually are at a cusp of digitizing the human body. That means, as opposed to looking at the human body as a, somehow these components that somehow fit together, actually what we're realizing that we are basically a biochemical, bioelectrical body. In fact, I would say it's primarily a biochemical stuff and some of the chemical signal that may cause bioelectrical activities, but we are basically a biochemical body. Now, what if you can understand at a molecular level every single thing that's happening in your body? And at that time, it becomes simply a math and a chemistry problem. You look at the people who have a particular disease and you look at the biochemical activities that are going on and you say, how do we reverse these biochemical activities to bring it back to homeostasis? And boom, now you have a precise, personalized solution. The problem that biotech and the pharma has had is that if you want to create a massive blockbuster drug, it has to work for billions of people. Now, each of us are so different from each other, even though our genetics are more or less the same, 99.8% the same genetics, right? But when we look at individually our biochemical activities that, as you mentioned, come from our microbial activities, the 40 trillion in our gut, and give or take 500 billion or trillion in our mouth alone. And all these things are creating millions and millions of genes that are being expressed in our body, whereas our human genes only express, give or take, about 22,000 protein coding genes. So now what's really happening is we are very unique. In fact, I would argue that two people may have very similar genetic DNA, but they have completely different output functional microbial activities or the functional gene expression that is happening in the two people. And what I'm trying to say is that the pharma companies always wanted one drug for everybody. And what really happens is to find one thing that works, you have to go, as opposed to precisely looking at what's happening in each individual, you go higher and higher and higher until you find something that is common. And the higher you up you go, the more things it impacts. And that's the reason not only it has more side effects, it works for some people and it doesn't work for other people. In fact, I mean, you are from the pharma world. I mean, you would probably tell that, some of the best drugs have efficacy of 20 or 25%, right? And most people don't understand what that means. What that means is 75% of the people, either it doesn't work or it actually harms you. Now imagine that.
Don't give away the secret.
But my point is, imagine if you were selling any product other than the biotech product, and you went to your customer and say, sir, I have a product. They just 75% of you are going to be only harmed and will have no effect. 25% of you may get better, but you're still going to have a side effect. Now, how many would you like, sir? And they're going to look at you, so are you crazy? And you don't buy that kind of a shit. But guess what? That is what the bio. So when I looked at that stuff, I'm saying, now we have the technology to actually precisely personalize the medicine for each individual, because now we are able to look at gene expressions. We are able to look at the molecular activities. And now we can use the food, the supplements, or even some of the synthetic drugs, but we can precisely do it for each individual. And to me, so my reason for going to biotech was the cost of sequencing is coming down. For the first time, it is possible to do the gene expression that was never, RNA sequencing that was never possible before. So people only did DNA sequencing. Third thing is cost of computing is marginally zero. Now you can fire up 40 cores at AWS. Cost of AI and the power of AI has gone up so much that you can analyze massive sets of petabytes of data that's coming from human gene expression and make a sense of it. This couldn't have been possible 10 years ago. And so to me, the reason for doing that is today we have all of that stuff that actually confluence of these exponential technology coming together that is going to make it possible. And that's the reason I started Biome.
So let's get right into that then, because you mentioned digitizing the human body at the molecular level, using artificial intelligence, understanding this trillions of these things that live within us. So Viome has, you started out with a gut intelligence test looking sort of the gut microbiome. You've diversified a little beyond that into broader sort of immune system, mitochondrial health, and you're connecting this also sort of the third prong of this, sort of the diets, the nutrition. You recently, you acquired. My wife used to work over at Campbell Soup. You acquired one of their nutrition companies to tie in sort of how we should eat. To take us into Viome, for those that don't know the story, I mean, I know it pretty well, but take us a little bit into it and just sort of what you're doing. And don't go into the clinical stuff yet. I'll ask those questions in a bit.
So let me describe it more in a fundamental way, because most people somehow seem to think what we do are these tests. So if you look at, there are 3 layers of Viome. The bottommost layer is, how do we actually get the molecular level data? So in a sense that there was nobody else in the world today that was actually collecting the gene expression data. Mm-hmm. And so to me, the problem was that when you look at the human beings, your DNA never changes in your lifetime, right? So for example, when I do my DNA test today, and somebody says, based on your DNA, which is your fingerprint, which is your unique biomarker, I can now tell you what diet is good for you. Now imagine, now I gain 100 pounds and I'm obese. My DNA has not changed. And what would the DNA-based company would say? Just keep doing what you're doing. Your DNA is the same. Now I got diabetes. Now I got depression. Now I have autoimmune diseases. Now I'm developing every single chronic disease. And I go back and do my DNA test and say, just keep the same diet. You're doing just fine. Sir, I'm about to die. What do you mean? Don't change anything. I have to change something. So what if your DNA does not change when you develop these chronic diseases? Then what does change? And what changes is actually our gene expression. So our genes don't change, but our gene expression is constantly changing. And I don't think most people understand that we as human beings, every single part of our body, Ira, you will obviously, that it had an identical, not similar, identical DNA. So that means you can look at your hair, it has the same DNA as your teeth, right? Then how is it that we don't have the teeth growing on our head and hair growing in our mouth, right? It is simply the gene expression that means some genes are being turned on, some genes are being turned off, some genes are overexpressed, some genes are underexpressed, and that's how I get skin, that's how I get, a kidney, that's how I get heart, and that's how I get all the different tissues. And that to me is the key, is the gene expression. Now, it's very interesting is that, as you mentioned in the beginning, that 99% of all the genes that are expressed in the human body are not our own. They actually come from these trillions of these organisms. As you mentioned, these are bacteria, these are viruses, these are yeast and the fungus and mold and all that stuff. And by the way, everybody's thinking now, ick, why don't we just kill them? Well, interesting thing is, they are the one who keeps you alive. I mean, without them, you won't be able to get the nutrition. So when you eat food, like for example, you're eating fiber, the human body cannot digest the fiber. It gets fermented by our gut microbes, and in turn, they release the nutrient like butyrate, the short chain fatty acid that our body needs. So in some sense, as we co-evolved together, we started to outsource many of our functions to these microbes so that we could all live together in symbiosis. Now, in those days, we didn't have antibiotics. In those days, we didn't have these food that were available, all 12 months of the year. So we were eating different foods, we were eating different organisms. We had a massive amount of biodiversity, just like a rainforest. And 2 people can have very healthy gut and yet have completely different organisms in their gut, right? So interesting thing that I found was, going back to as an entrepreneur, it is never about having the right answer. It is about asking the right questions, right? And to me, the key to solving a problem is the questions you ask as an entrepreneur, rather than just simply having an answer to what you want to do, right? So for example, if you do today a Google search, and you can literally type in any of the chronic diseases you want, you can type Alzheimer and microbiome, it will show you that how microbiome actually contributes to Alzheimer causing neuroinflammation. Parkinson's starts in the gut 15 years before you see the first symptom. Depression, anxiety, autoimmune diseases. In fact, we just showed the research that came out 2 weeks ago that showed almost every type of cancer has the microbiome in that, and how microbiome protects the cancer from the immune system, because microbiome knows how to modulate our immune system. Remember, 70% of our immune system is along our gut lining. So our microbes and our immune system actually work together. They tune each other, right? Yeah. So when you talk about protection from COVID-19 or protection from flu, that literally is how your immune system is behaving. So if you have a balanced gut, if you have a balanced immune system, you are well protected against all types of pathogens. When you constantly have what I call systemic chronic inflammation, and your immune system is constantly fighting a chronic inflammation. Most people may not realize, Ara, but chronic diseases are caused by chronic inflammation, right? The systemic chronic inflammation, not the acute inflammation. Acute inflammation is there to protect you, but chronic inflammation is what causes these diseases. And chronic inflammation happens many, many ways. A poor diet, that means you're not getting the nutrients your body needs. You're getting a lot of oxidative stress. You're getting, all types of cellular stress. And by the way, mental stress. You're constantly worried about losing your job. You're constantly worried about what someone on the social media thinks of you. Did you get enough likes on the post you just did or not did, right? How many people really commented on your post? And you're constantly all these stress. And I'm thinking, oh my God, no wonder we have this epidemic of these chronic diseases, right? So our thought process, again, going back to was, what if we could look at every single gene expression in our human body? Mm-hmm. And it turns out there are only 3 types of genes that are expressed in the human body. There are microbial genes, mm-hmm. there are mitochondrial genes, mm-hmm. and there are human genes, right? So human genes are the ones that we all think of, that human genome sequencing. And somehow we thought once we understand the human DNA, we will know the software of the human life, and all diseases will disappear forever. We know what happened, right? Because it turns out the DNA never changes as you develop diseases, so they couldn't really figure out what to do with that. Most people now, mitochondria is very, very interesting. Most people don't know mitochondria used to be a bacteria that is caught inside the human cell. It is an organelle inside the cell. It provides all the energy to the cell. And by the way, it has its own DNA, different from the human DNA that we get in our cell, right? So we are able to look at mitochondrial gene expression that shows us the mitochondrial biogenesis. And mitochondrial biogenesis, by the way, is very, very important for aging, and it's very important for cleaning up all the cellular mass that we create, all the ROS, all kinds of that damage that we get to our cells coming from radiation, coming from a whole bunch of different types of environmental stresses. So mitochondrial biogenesis, looking at the mitochondrial energy production. And then we go out and look at all other human gene expressions, right? And then we look at the gut microbial gene expression, and we look at the oral microbial gene expression, because human body is like a donut, right? There's a tube that goes through that. Yep. So our thought is, why not analyze the top of the tube? Because this is, I'm not sure, Ira, you done the work on this or not. There are more types of microbes, more species of microbes in your mouth than in your gut. Right? So there are more types of organisms in our mouth, but the quantity is less than 1% of what's in the gut. Okay. So gut is about close to 40 trillion, and this is about 1% of that. But in terms of the diversity of microbes, it is substantially more in your oral cavity than it's in your gut. Right? And that's the reason when mother says chew your food, she was the scientist, she knew what that meant. Chewing your food allows the oral microbiome to actually transform that food and actually get it ready for it to go into the small intestine and the large and the colon, right? So by chewing your food, you allow it to be actually microbes to start doing the things. And very interesting, even when the baby is born, the first couple of days, the mother's milk is really the oligosaccharide. It is purely, by the way, so the oligosaccharide cannot be digested by the human body. So imagine that, right? The baby who is just born and mother wants to take care of this baby. She gives him the food that a baby cannot digest. Yeah. that food can only be digested by the gut microbes. Think about that for a second. What is nature telling us? That if you want your offspring to be healthy, you need to feed them, not feed it. That means nature knows that healthy microbiome will develop the immune system. And that's the reason the baby gets all types of infections, because in the early days, the immune system is not trained by the gut microbes. And that's why they constantly get ear infection. They constantly get infected. The first time they come in touch with any other babies, they constantly get infected. Yeah. As adult, we get really good immune system. And as we get older, our immune system starts to get weaker again. And that's the reason when you get COVID-19 or flu, it's the babies and the adults that are always at higher risk than the young people are, right? So my point I'm trying to say is that, so at Viome, we look at all of these different things. And then once we understand the gene expression, then we take the next part, which is understand what molecules are going to be produced, such as how much butyrate you're producing, how much lipopolysaccharide, which is inflammatory compound you're producing, how much of flagella you're producing, how much sulfide you're producing, how much ammonia you're producing. And now it's very clear, if your gut is producing a lot of sulfide, then we have to tell you that don't eat the food that contain high amount of sulfate, like broccoli or cabbage or Brussels sprout, because they contain sulfate. And if you're producing a lot of sulfide already, that causes inflammation. Then if you don't cut them down, then you to actually get more sulfide out there. Same type of thing happens when you think you're eating healthy and eating spinach. If you eat spinach and your oxalate digestive pathways are not very active, now you have oxalic acid coming from spinach that is not going to be digested, and the best outcome is you might get a kidney stone, right? But you actually not going to help you there, right? Same thing happens, by the way, when people are eating a lot of protein because they work out. And the problem with the protein is if it's not digested in the upper intestine, it goes to the colon, and the protein, and it gets fermented by these microbes. When the protein gets fermented, it releases ammonia. And that causes a lot of harm. So now you have two choices: either eat the digestive enzyme with a protein, or cut down that protein. And so my point is, we look at all the stuff that's going on in your gut, all the stuff that's going on in your body, and all the stuff that's going on in your mouth. And based on that, we can tell you what foods you should eat and why, what foods you should avoid and why. And they are designed just for you for that time. It is not for lifetime. Because as you change your diet, your ecosystem changes. That means 4 months later, you'll have to readjust your ecosystem, retune your body. And what we're doing now, Ira, is in the next 2 months, we're going to be launching in August, the first week of August, we'll be launching the precision supplements. That means on demand, made to order nutrients that your body needs, everything that you need and nothing you don't need. And it is made for you. That capsule is made for you after you do the test. That means we look at your body and say, you need 22 milligram of lycopene. We need 11 milligram of butyrate. You need 7 milligram of elderberry. And then we literally look at each thing and then make those capsules just for you. And we ship them to you. That has never been done. So now you talk about precision pharma, which is literally the food as a medicine drug. So food is the drug. We concentrate on the food, we put them into these capsules, and we give you them precisely for each individual. That to me is a breakthrough. That to me is a new way of looking at it, where the food is a medicine. And by the way, we all think we actually invented something here. I feel so sometimes wake up and say, oh my God, look at what I invented. And it turns out, this is something we have known for thousands of years, right? Hippocrates said in 2,500 years ago, he says, all diseases begin in the gut. One man's food is another man's poison. Let food be thy medicine, let thy medicine be the food. So every doctor takes a Hippocratic oath and they forget what Hippocrates said, which is the food is the medicine. So there you have it.
No, it's really fascinating, and I love the image of, we used to, years ago I was in the phytochemical business, and we used to talk about food cabinets becoming the medicine cabinets. That was a while ago. So, but you're finally making it happen. So that's really nice to see. And this concept of change, that we're not just this static thing, but we're constantly, whether it's the microbiome, whether it's just our cells, trillions of them, they're constantly in motion. They're never going to be the same one day to another. So this is very elegant. I'd like to just get into a couple of the sort of the clinical projects you have going on, because obviously we think a lot about, as you were saying, the gut inflammation, but there's a few fascinating ones that you've recently signed with different collaborators. And one of them, which is amazing to me, is this one you did with the Mayo Clinic a few months ago, where you're working with your technologies, not just on sort of the nutritional stuff with obesity and sort of diabetes, but you're working in sleep as well. And this is a really, I mean, we've talked a little bit about sleep on the show in the past, just not just because obviously the general wellness that we all need a good night's sleep, but all of these interesting connections with dementia and even lifespan if we're not getting enough sleep. Talk a little bit about this collaboration, if you would, and then if you can focus on sleep. I think this is an underappreciated topic.
So first of all, most people may not realize that microbiome has its own circadian rhythm. Right. So there is a microbial circadian rhythm that also works in conjunction with our own circadian rhythm. So the time you eat is actually really important when it comes to getting a good night's sleep. The time of eating, because to get the microbial circadian rhythm actually in sync with your circadian rhythm, it is extremely important. So it is the light, but it's also the time of the eating, and the types of food you eat are also very important. So one of the interesting things I find is that in some of the religions, in Eastern philosophy, they came up with the religion reason why you should be doing it, but it was actually scientific. They said people shouldn't eat after sunset. And the idea was, since you would normally be awake several hours after sunset, if you can eat before it goes dark, then you have 3 or 4 hours to digest the food. That's like saying, don't eat the food within 4 hours of your sleeping, right? Because what happens is when you're sleeping, your digestive system is no longer working, right? Otherwise, you'll be peeing and doing all kinds of things. So basically, and other thing that happens is even, when we are eating our food, it is very interesting is that when we eat our food, and if we are in that sympathetic nervous system, right, we are in the fight or flight mode, what happens is our body stops digesting food. So when you come from work, you are stressed, you're worrying that your boss said something that makes you really angry, or you're worried about your job, or you just hate your job, and you are in that mode. Guess what happens? Anytime you are stressed and you are in that fight or flight mode, the number one thing that happens in the fight or flight mode is it shuts down your digestive system. Because remember, when there was a tiger chasing you, it didn't matter whether your food was being digested because you were about to become a food for someone else. All that mattered was you pump up your muscles and you get ready to fight, or you're ready to flight. And at that time, and that's what happens. So when we have this chronic stress, it actually shuts down our immune system. So what I would say would be, before you eat your food, take a 3 deep breath. Take the deep breath, bring your system back into parasympathetic mode before you put the first bite in your mouth. So take deep breath, get yourself into a situation where you're calm. And then when you're eating a food, chew a lot, because that allows your oral microbiome to mix it. Right. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's those simple techniques really changes our body. It changes. So now there are good signs that shows that your glycemic response in the body for the same food that actually depends on the time you eat the same food. That means eating that same bread at breakfast versus lunch changes your glycemic response. Think about that for a second. So not only between the different people, two people can eat the same slice of bread, can have completely different response. And we all know that intuitively. Intuitively, we know that there are some people who can eat carbs all day and they never gain a weight. And some people smell the damn food and I gain weight. I mean, that's me, right? You smell bread, I gain weight, right? And I'm thinking, what could be wrong? Well, nothing is wrong. It is that my microbes are actually take that food and create a high glycemic response, right? And that can actually be controlled. Now, imagine if you can take the right set of supplement that allow you to eat pasta and bread just like your friends do, right? And not gain weight. That would be amazing, isn't it? So what we're doing with Mayo Clinic is to actually understand why is it people who have insomnia or people who have a lack of sleep, what is going on in their body? How do you reverse those symptoms to bring it back into the healthier thing and show and prove clinically that they can sleep better? We're doing the same thing with diabetes with them. We are working with Kaiser. We are working with United Healthcare. We are working with Advent Health. And the idea is to look at depression and anxiety. We have we have now, as you know, several hundreds of thousands of people who have taken our test. And they tell us all the time that when they actually follow our guidelines and they follow the recommendations and our supplements and food, here's what happens. They tell us they no longer are depressed. They no longer have anxiety. They no longer have acne, eczema. Those were just simply the inflammation in the body. So when you get rid of the inflammation, your acne goes away, your eczema goes away, right? And they're reporting the things that I never thought. They're no longer taking biologics. I mean, imagine Hashimoto, people who have Hashimoto disease, they're saying my CRP and my inflammation and my autoimmune things came down so much, I no longer need biologics, right? So now we are working on with United Healthcare Group on IBD, which is an autoimmune disease, Crohn and colitis, to actually show it to them that we can diagnose the signatures. We can in fact understand what causes the people to have relapse or remission, and can we give them the right set of foods to increase the distance between the relapses, right? And that is literally how we look at every single one of them, to make this a pure science where we no longer think it is a, what I would say, anecdotal. It is, can we actually do a double-blind, placebo-controlled thing to show that food and supplements can actually be the same medicine with very little side effect, in fact, no side effect, instead of taking pharma drugs. And that, to me, is our goal, is to work with these clinics to show that we can reduce the overall, we can improve the health of the people, reduce the overall cost of the insurance, and show these specific diseases, whether they are metabolic diseases. So other thing that we are also doing, Ira, which we have not announced, we submitted to FDA that we are able to detect stage 0 and stage 1 oral cancer, just by looking at your saliva microbial activity. So we have actually with FDA, the breakthrough device status, we should be getting a report within this week for that approval. So unbelievable that how we are able to do that. So to us, we are looking at now pancreatic cancer, because it has been shown the pancreatic cancer, ovarian cancer, colorectal cancer, many of these cancers are caused by the microbial activities, and how even in a pancreatic cancer, how gut bacteria goes through bile duct into pancreas, shuts down the immune system, allows the cancer to grow. And this professor at NYU injected the antimicrobial in the mice directly into pancreas, killed the microbes, and the immune system killed the cancer. Think about that for a second, right? That means the microbes were protecting the cancer. Yeah. And so, you know, it is clearly shown not the cancer is caused or influenced by the microbiome. Even the treatment for cancer, chemotherapy or immunotherapy, their effectiveness and side effect depends on your gut microbiome. You can predict which person is going to have a high response from immunotherapy, which one is going to low, the side effect, and you can come up with the adjuvant therapies to reduce the side effect of these therapies simply by taking the right set of food. So you're nodding your head. So why don't you educate us now about, you know, all these
things. You're saying some things that are, I mean, not that they seem obvious, but when we look at immunotherapies and CAR-T and so forth, and these $1 million price tags, but we're missing we miss these common sense things. You wonder, wow, I mean, if we just, because we see that really small percentage of people that those drugs work in, if we just open up sort of this microbiome connection a little further, some of the impact, I mean, it's outstanding. It's just,
what are your friends, what are your ex-employer doing in that field? I mean, you know, we have a relationship with your GlaxoSmithKline.
Yeah, let's go there, because that's the next thing on my list. And you know, I haven't been there for the last decade, but you're working with GlaxoSmithKline. Obviously, they're very interested in Viome's ability to study microbial gene expression. Obviously, there's trillions of organisms, gene expression, doing all sorts of stuff. You're working with the vaccine division, which equally, you know, that struck another, you know, that rang another bell in my head. And it talks about in the PR about vaccine-based therapies to ultimately help treat disease. You know, whatever you can tell us about this, because this is I mean, vaccines are such an important, everyone's focused on COVID nowadays, but when we talk about vaccines, that means a much broader set of therapeutic interventions potentially on different fronts.
Now imagine, nobody ever thought having a preventative vaccine for chronic diseases. Now imagine if we know that there are organisms that actually cause, for example, say obesity or diabetes or autoimmune diseases, or pick a type 1 diabetes, by the way. So now the research is starting to show that even type 1 diabetes, which is considered genetic, actually is not genetic, it actually is epigenetic. That means you can actually change type 1 diabetes, and a lot of the viruses like CMV is quite implicated in that type 1 diabetes, right? So my point I'm trying to make is that if we know there are organisms that are influential or causative of certain diseases, then you can develop a vaccine for those organisms. And if you do, suddenly you have vaccine for obesity, vaccine for diabetes, vaccine for autoimmune diseases, vaccine for depression, right? So maybe you come from a family that has depression. And what if you get a vaccine and you no longer are going to be prone to depression anymore, right? Because you kill the organism that actually responsible for it. So our goal is to really understand what are the set of organisms, the protein, in what conditions those things cause a certain disease, and can we develop a vaccines when those circumstances exist, so people who are very prone to it actually don't get those diseases. And that is, to me, is really a very novel area of making illness optional, right? That means we will know exactly what needs to be done. We can look at the information, tell you what to do, and then based on that, that's literally how I think the healthcare is going to be done. And even at a consumer level, you don't need to go to a doctor anymore. In my view of the world, in the next decade, you and I are going to become the CEO of our own health. We're going to literally know more about our body than our doctor within a few minutes is going to ever know. They may do a blood test, they may do few things, but they will never know every single molecule that's being produced in our body. And we will know exactly what to do about it. And that, to me, is the key. So that's the reason we are actually working directly with consumers, because that's how you get massive, that's how you create a movement. So we have hundreds of thousands of people, and you may not know, but 2 weeks ago, we launched our second product, Health Intelligence. So now we are able to look at your mitochondrial gene expression, as I was mentioning, mitochondrial biogenesis, mitochondrial energy production. We are looking at the human gene expression. That means your immunity system health score, your cellular stress, right? Your biological age. We're looking at every single thing that's happening on the human side, all of the gut microbial activities, and combining them together. And then we're going to be launching the next thing. We use saliva. That means we're now going to look at the top of the tube, bottom of the tube, other side of the tube, and literally give you the foods you need to eat and why, and tell you what foods to avoid and why. And you can go buy that today for hundreds of dollars, not thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. That is the beauty. Is just 4 years ago, it was tens of thousands of dollars. And today, now you can buy it for $100, right? That's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, really mind-boggling. Well, how far we've come. It's
how far we have come. And I will have to tell you, you come from this world of medicine. What do you think of what we are doing? And don't you think that's the world that we have to create?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Look, I'll go back to the fact that most people don't realize that the majority of every drug, biologic, even consumer healthcare product nowadays comes from nature, and either plants, fungi, or bacteria in some form. We never really whip up new drugs anywhere in a computer or anything like that. Nature. Look, the reason the trees outside my window here survived for their ancestors were here, almost 1 billion years now, is because they've come up with interesting ways to create natural chemistries to keep them alive and keep them surviving through ice ages and so forth. So it fits the story the right way. It's how we got here, and ultimately, if we're smart enough, how we're going to stay here and not get eliminated by some virus or other disease that.
So, Ira, why is the pharma companies not doing this? Why are they continuing to poison people with these chemicals when they know there is a better way?
if I have the answer to that, it's about, in my opinion, and that's, I left pharma. For years, I'm thinking about when I was at SmithKline, we had people that went scuba diving in Spain. I mean, there was a place they went scuba diving and they found all sorts of neat things in the ocean that produced interesting chemicals. And it just, as technology changed, I guess people thought that you were just going to be able to push a button on your computer and pop out a new drug that would cure everything and have no side effects. But evolution, nature does things, has been learning and adapting and changing. And sometimes, big pharma, big industry doesn't keep up with the stuff. But you're ushering it in, so it's good.
My thing, one of the things I feel, which is maybe just my jaded view of the world, the whole medical industrial complex does not benefit from curing a disease. From a chronic disease perspective, they benefit from managing the disease, right? For them, if you look at the whole medical industrial complex, everyone makes money when you are sick and no one makes money when you are healthy, right? So now imagine from that perspective, if I have a chronic disease when I'm 22, as far as they're concerned, that a lifetime subscriber, ka-ching, that for the rest of the life, you have to take my drug. So they have no incentive in the way the whole system is organized for anyone to be healthy. They want a lifetime subscriber, which are chronic diseases, right? So to me, my thinking is that they cannot change as a company because now they have so much vested in managing the people to do the diseases. So they have the new types of companies that have to come along that actually would disrupt this thinking that says, hey, it is not about keeping people sick. It is empowering people to actually stay healthy.
Yeah, you're right there. And look, I mean, if you look at the transformation that's happened in the industry, they got rid of manufacturing, they got rid of sales forces, they're getting rid of R&D. So what's left? I mean, they're basically just marketing machines. And at the end of the day, they're plugging in all your technologies and capabilities into this organization or two that does good marketing. And but yeah, you're right. Yeah, I think you're spot on with everything you're saying on this front. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, this is, moving out of the science and into finance for a moment. I mean, you did a Series A of 25 million for Viome. I think you're raising around 100 million now, or you might have raised that already. I take my hat off to you because you're clearly of the sort of the ilk that no longer needs to go around to lots of seed stage venture companies and ask for money at ridiculous. I take my hat off to you. That being said, a lot of us still do that. Can you give us sort of your top line view, having spent a lot of time in infotech and now in biotech, your views of sort of the early stage biotech financing realm, a little bit of where the valley of death now sits, and obviously you're involved in things like XPRIZE, which envision sort of different models. What's the situation nowadays for biotech? Are you happy with the way the biotech finance is? Are you disappointed? I'm personally disappointed with it, but take us into your journey on this front and what you feel about the whole space.
So I think the financing is just a way of creating the opportunity. So first thing you have to start is not worry about finance, worry about that if successful, are you going to be able to change the lives of billions of people? That means if you can create a story, if you can create that why whatever the service you're going to be providing, if successful, will fundamentally change the way people live their life. And then you show them that this is where you are, this is what you're going to do next, and this is how you get there. That means you don't have to be there today, but you have to be able to show clear path of where you are to go there, and you can show them in small chunks that you can execute today to say, look, I'm going to launch. The first thing is going to be understanding gut microbiome. So if I went to investors and say, I am going to be a gut microbial testing company, there would be no one interested in that.
Right.
What I said was, we are interested in understanding the human health and making illness optional, understanding chronic disease. That is what we're trying to do. To do that, first thing we're going to do is to understand what's in the gut, because that's where the 99% genes are expressed. Then we're going to go look at the host side and looking at how the metabolites released by the gut going to change the gene expression of the human gene expression, the mitochondrial gene expression. Then we're going to start to look at the saliva. Then we'll have the whole picture. And then we're going to do the clinical trials with the likes of the Mayo Clinics and the Kaiser. And then we're going to be able to develop a relationship with these pharma companies like GSK for vaccines or other companies. And this is how we're going to go out and execute. People say, that makes sense. And guess what? If you look at what we have done is exactly going along with that. So my point I'm trying to say is that people will invest in the opportunities you create for them. Capital is not patriotic. So capital will flow wherever the opportunities are, whether it is China, India, Brazil, they don't care. Same type of thing. Resources are now, doesn't need to be localized. You can find a great engineer or a great biotech guy in any part of the world, whether they are in Philadelphia or whether they are in Ukraine. Sure. It's literally the collaboration is still the same, right? You can now collaborate with anyone around the world. And that to me is the key. So what I'm finding is that lot of the world in the biotech, the reason they have such a difficult time is it's generally started by the scientists who have a particular way of looking at it, who come from a solution rather than the problem. They believe there's only one way of solving that problem. And that to me is a fallacy. That's why people. So to me, I say, I don't have any vested interest. I don't have a paper that I have published. I don't have a particular theory that I believe in. I simply let the data speak for itself. I'm going to simply collect massive amount of data. I'm going to analyze the data. And it may be, it is PGC1 alpha that causes the mitochondrial biogenesis. It may be, it is PPAR gamma that's doing it, or it may be something totally different. I don't have a vested interest in that. I'm going to look at the data and let the data, rather than being a scientist that says, I know it is that, and I'm going to build a target for that. And God, why it doesn't work? I just cannot believe it won't work.
Oh boy. Yeah. No, that's
right. That's how it works.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I've seen that situation a lot. Obviously, Elon Musk sent SpaceX to NASA a couple weeks ago, groundbreaking stuff. You are very active in moonshots, namely Moon Express. Take us out on that.
So by the way, the Moon
Express. Just talk a little bit about it if you could.
Yeah, so the Moon Express I started for a very simple reason. How do we protect the human, the whole humanity from potential extinction, right? So all of us, give or take 8 billion of us are living on the single spacecraft. We call that lovingly planet Earth. And this spacecraft is flying naked up in the space. If it gets hit by one large asteroid, the whole humanity will completely disappear. And what I really find fascinating is I hear a lot of people and saying, oh, I'm so worried about our planet. And I keep telling them, don't you worry about this planet. It will be there way after we are all gone, right? Worry about the human species. Don't worry about the planet, right? Last time it happened 65 million years ago, dinosaurs were much, much bigger than us. It wiped out all the dinosaurs. And what happened to the planet? It survived. In fact, not only it survived, it created human beings, right? Think about that, the intelligent beings. Now, once we get wiped out, maybe they'll create super intelligent human beings. Who knows? Right? So my point I'm trying to say is that our job was, there is no reason the humans cannot live on the moon, Mars, or beyond. So why not start to create the underlying infrastructure? And again, going back to the same thing, people were asking the wrong question. So when he said, let's go to the moon and we're going to settle down on the moon, you know what the question people will ask? Well, how are you going to grow the food on the moon? Right? And my point is, that's the wrong question. The right question to ask is, why do we eat food? Because once you answer that, you eat food for energy and you eat food for nutrition. There are many ways of getting nutrition and energy. What if you can get that from photosynthesis? What you can get from radiation? And they didn't happen, by the way, when I started Viome. Every single microbiome company was looking at asking the same wrong question, which is, I want to know the organisms that are in my gut. And to me, that was a wrong question, because it doesn't matter what organisms are in your gut. What matters is what they are producing. Right? The human body doesn't care what name we gave it, who is doing it. What matters is what is being produced, what are the signals being sent to the human body, right? And so we focused on the functionality of them by looking at the gene expression, not the organisms themselves, but what they were producing. And that fundamental change of knowing what they are producing was very different. And here's why. Two people may have diabetes, and they may have completely different organisms, but they're producing exactly the same molecule that causes diabetes, right? And here's very interesting thing that most people don't understand. The same organism can produce completely different thing in your gut and in my gut. The same organism, depending on the ecosystem it is in. Okay. Just like we as humans, when I am at work, I'm an entrepreneur. I go home, I'm a dishwasher. What changed? The environment, right? And that literally what happens. If you are an organism that is an environment which is rich in a particular nutrient, you start to morph yourself to get that nutrient. If you are an environment that is rich in different nutrients, you morph yourself into survival into that nutrient, right? So my point is, what you take, what you produce are completely different based on the environment you are in. And that's the reason the problem wasn't getting solved. And that's the reason we believe we at Viome have that shot. And that's the reason we created these things that people can actually go today and buy today, not someday, and actually learn about their body. And not only just learn, find out exactly what to do, what foods you should eat to keep you healthy and why, what foods you should avoid eating and why. And suddenly you will find yourself having all those different things you were feeling were gone, right? So with that, all I would say is, Ira, what an honor and a pleasure to be talking to you here.
It's a real pleasure for everybody that's going to be listening or watching on the YouTube channel or the various podcast networks. You've been listening to Naveen Jain, CEO and founder of Viome, member of the board of directors of the X Prize Foundation of Singularity University. Naveen, thank you for taking the time to come on the show. Thank you for everything you're doing. And for, as we say on the show, thank you for moving the human story forward one step at a time. It's been a real great honor having you today.
Thank you, brother.